we have Peter Nutt and Mark Mullins from Perks, and last week we heard about superannuation and home loans and the taxation system. Tonight we're hearing about personal insurance and financial planning. So please join me in welcoming Peter and Mark to the stage. Yeah, sure.
How are you guys? Thanks for sticking around. Did all you guys come last week? Nope, some have missed it. No worries. So you get to hear another top discussion about insurance and type of insurance this time. Cheers. So guys, yeah, I'm Mark Mullins. My title is Life Insurance Specialist at Perks, and this is Peter Nunn, who's, what's your title? Senior Financial Planner. There we go. Yeah, as Lockie, it is Lockie, yes, there we go. Mentioned, yeah, you guys would have heard from Brian and Jess last week, who Brian's one of the partners and Jess is one of the senior accountants there that for you guys handle all the tax and all that type of thing. So I'm sure the most important topic there that you guys want to know about is the salary sacrifice and making sure you maximise all that sort of stuff, and we've gone through how income tax works and deductions and all that type of thing. And then Luke would have gone through all the home loans and any financing requirements that you've got. And so just continuing on with that theme, Peter and I work in a slightly different area of the business, and so we're going to be running through, I'll specifically be running through protecting your income, which is another form of insurance, as I mentioned, and Peter will go through growing your wealth, and then we'll have questions at the end if there's any. But feel free to ask any questions as we're going through. Yeah, somebody smart in our office thought it would be funny to come up with these terms, which I think you might have seen last week for Brian, and Jess, and Luke. They gave me the contagious diseases expert title, which after going to the 4th year dinner for the first time this year, I don't think I'm quite have the expertise in the right type of contagious diseases that Mark so yeah, expecting the worst and preparing accordingly. So that is basically my job, is assuming the worst is going to happen and trying to find solutions for that so that it isn't a financial problem if that sort of thing happens. And yet that is a very true statement at the bottom there. You will hope that you don't need me, but you're glad you'll have me if you do need me. Peter's being described as the financial knack. And yeah, not everyone thinks they need one, but those that do have them do swear by them. And yeah, and Peter will, as your earnings continue to grow as you guys start working, Peter's job is basically maximising the use of those earnings and making sure that you guys are able to achieve the goals that you want, whether they're going on a holiday somewhere, buying your first house, making sure your superannuation assets are growing, or whatever the case may be. It's just about maximising that money that you are making to make sure that you're not wasting it. So yeah, my area is protecting your income. So I'll be talking about what's your greatest asset, considering your potential earnings, just to emphasise the importance of that. Are you at risk? Income protection insurance is basically the topic that I'm talking about, and that's the solution to these problems that we're talking about. Exactly what it covers, so you can understand that and how it's completely different to the discussions you've just heard from Megan. Give you a real rough idea on the cost. It's very difficult to give you an idea on cost because every individual circumstance can make it different, but just to give you a rough estimate on that. What you need to do if you want some more information on it and how you go about putting it in place if that's the case, and any other questions. So what's your greatest asset? You ask anybody that question that doesn't know anything about income protection insurance and hasn't seen me already, they're going to say that their house or their car is their greatest asset. Common response, and it's just because I think people don't realise that the second point there is, without doubt, your greatest asset. Your ability to earn an income. You guys have spent 6 years at least, and probably for some more, getting to the position that you're in now, where you're about to go into the workforce, and you will be, in the scheme of things, earning good money. And without that income, there will be no house, there will be no car, and there won't be anything else that you're looking to obtain either. So I think it's a no-brainer that your greatest asset is your ability, your health, and your ability to keep working. And just to put that in dollar terms for you, just in case you're second-guessing the fact that that's your greatest asset. So for the mere mortal Australians like Peter and I, we'll probably earn around $2 million during our working life. You guys don't fit into that category. So from experience I've been working with the 60-year students, and as you go into internships and all that sort of thing, for the last probably 4 or 5 years. Experience shows that probably in your first year, depending on which hospital you're in and how much overtime you're doing, you'll earn probably between 60 and 85 grand in your first year. That income will quickly increase. So just purely based on an 85 grand income, assuming that you're 25 now and you work through to age 65, over your lifetime you're going to earn 6.8 million, just based on the 85, and obviously that keeps going up. 130 is a drop in the ocean as well if you decide to go into specialisations and private practice and all that type of thing. That will be, you'll be earning significantly more amounts than that. So unlikely going to have a house worth 6.8 million if you're earning 85 grand a year. So just puts it in perspective. Are you at risk? The amazing thing I see from some of the doctors is that, and it's the general consensus probably across the population in the Australian attitude, is that everything will be alright. You guys are at the forefront of when things don't go right. So just think of, you've already done some work in the hospitals, I believe, and so every one of those patients that you're seeing, while they're in the hospital, they're not earning income, and so they would be having, while they're obviously wanting to focus wholly and solely on their health and just get it better, and that's obviously the focus that you guys have for them, they're not earning income, and they would be having, potentially, if they haven't got income protection, or family support, or whatever the case may be, they'll be worrying about how they're going to pay the bills and stuff like that if they're stuck in hospital. So just keep that in mind as you speak to patients. What does it cover? As a generalisation, we're able to cover 84% of your income, and it might sound like a bit of a strange figure, but basically it's 75% of your income, and then they allow you to cover 100% of your super, so then 9% super, or that's just gone up to 9.25. So that's how they come up with that figure. The reason that they don't cover you for 100% of your income is that they want an enticement for you to go back to work. They prevent a significant amount of fraudulent claims by providing that amount, so there's an enticement for people to go back to work and get that extra amount that they're missing out on. And so that's basically any sickness or injury. So if you're wondering what you're covered for, basically any sickness or injury that prevents you from being able to work is pretty much covered under these policies. You're covered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anywhere in the world. So it doesn't matter if you're interstate on holidays, overseas on holidays, you're always covered. Playing sport, all of those types of things are covered. Going, decide to go skydiving, and you yourself doing one of those things. So income protection is basically offered to all occupations, but they do specifically tailor policies, and the policies that we look at for you guys are specifically tailored to medical professionals. The main area that they focus on with that is bloodborne virus. So the insurers deem bloodborne virus, and I'm not sure there's other things that fit outside this scope, but they deem bloodborne virus as HIV, Hep B, and Hep C. So if you were to contract any of those things while working, you will certainly be covered. And it's a bit of a no-brainer that, let's say you contract HIV and then you can't work because of that. It's a no-brainer. Every insurer will cover that type of thing. But some of the very good insurers will actually go to another level and say that, let's say you've gone out to be a GP or something like that, and I think Hep B is probably the least serious out of those three. And perhaps if you're not doing exposure-prone procedures as a GP, and medical board isn't stopping you from seeing patients, but if you felt obligated to tell your patients that you've got Hep B before you start treating them, and you lose patients because of that, the really good insurers will actually cover that, and they'll treat that as a claim as well. So even though you're not physically unable to do any part of your job, obviously that particular condition is covering that. So that can be a separator between certain policies. And we certainly see anybody at your age, basically, and it doesn't matter whether you're doctors or architects or engineers or working in the shop, at a bar or whatever. We see this income protection as the most important protection that you can put in place at this point in time. So while with Mega, obviously they're protecting you if you stuff up at work, income protection's looking after you if you can't do your job for another reason. Does that all make sense? All clear?
Sorry, just a quick question. How long do you have to be off work before income protection kicks in?
So there's waiting periods with this sort of stuff, which works a bit like an excess on a car insurance policy. It keeps premiums down. These policies aren't meant for if you're off work for a couple of days due to cold or flu. The most common waiting period is 30 days, but basically we've got scope. You've got anywhere from 14 days to 2-year waiting periods, and basically we can select that period on what you'd like. And obviously the longer the waiting period, the cheaper the premium is. And I don't know whether you guys might be under parents' private health insurance and stuff like that. People often think of waiting periods, they think of private health insurance. With private health insurance, the waiting period is you take out the policy and then you might not be covered for certain things for 3 months and then you're covered for things after that. Income protection doesn't work like that. So the waiting period on an income protection policy is from the minute that they accept you, you're covered for everything, but the waiting period starts from the date that you're injured. So if it's a 30-day waiting period, you may have had the policy in place for 5 years, you become injured at that point, then that's when the waiting period starts and you may need to be off work for more than 30 days to qualify for a benefit. So if you're off work, in that instance, if you're off work for 2 months, you'll receive 1 month's benefit. If you're off work for 3 months, you get 2 months benefit. Does that make sense?
Mark, is there a limit to how long it can last? Like, let's say I get a sign up for injury next year. How long will it last for?
Yep, and so that's another thing that you've got a choice over. We always recommend the maximum benefit period that you can get, which for you guys is age 70. Used to be age 65. The insurers are recently starting to push it out to age 70. That's becoming the normal retirement age. That's basically what they try and tie it in with. So we absolutely recommend an age 70 benefit period. You can go anywhere from a 2-year benefit period out to age 70. But the stats are basically if you're off work for 2 years, you're probably never going to go back to work again. So, and it doesn't need to be as serious as something like that. How much does it cost? Everybody wants to know, obviously. So I didn't actually used to give this information when I first started doing these presentations because, as I said, there's so many parameters depending on what benefit period we select, what waiting period we select, the quality of the policy, your gender, your age, your smoking status, all of those things affect the premium. But just to give you a bit of an indicative idea, and also I guess to put the premium in perspective, you're looking at anywhere from probably 1.5% to 3.5% of the income that you're earning. So if you're earning 100 grand, you're looking at say $1,500 a year to $3,500 a year. And so the diagram down the bottom there, I guess, just tries to emphasise or put that cost in perspective. So we're saying if you don't have any income protection at all in the top line, and obviously you receive 100% of your income and you spend it on rent or a home loan and normal living costs, and shopping and gas and utilities and all those types of things. If you are sick, you'll have no income received there other than your 10 days per year sick leave, which obviously when you start, I'm guessing you're all starting in January. When you all start in January, that will start at 0 and it will just start to accrue throughout the year. So if you don't take a sick day for the first 12 months, you'll have 10 days in the pot there where you'll actually have something to live off. But outside of that, you'll be on your own and perhaps relying on parents and things like that, which they may not be very happy with. But if you were to take out the income protection, and let's say it was 3%, that's probably on the upper end. It's generally probably not going to be that expensive, and I'm just trying to be a bit conservative. You're still going to get 97% of your income to pay for all and survive and all those sort of things. But if you are sick and can't work, you get up to 84% of your income, and that'll continue 365 days a year, and potentially, if you need it, until age 70 or for whatever period that you need to.
This is a very hypothetical question, but for example, if you've got, like, for example, a spinal cord injury next year, and your income next year was like 75 grand, and however, like, if you were unable to work from age 25 to age 70, normally we would expect our income to go up each year. Does it account for that?
The only, it does, but only inflation, unfortunately. So it's not going to keep pace with your earnings. So the other point that I didn't make on the previous slide that I should have was when I was talking about the specifically tailored policies, which will help a little bit with that question. So when I was saying generally you can cover 84% of your income, I should have added that they actually make an exception for you guys. So for medical grads, they'll actually allow us to cover up to 10 grand per month. Income protection, they always talk monthly benefits because they're monthly claim periods. But a 10 grand per month benefit is basically, you need to be earning 160 grand to be entitled to that sort of benefit generally. But the insurers, because they know that your earnings will jump up quite quickly, are happy to essentially over-insure you. So first year you might earn 70 grand or something, but we can actually cover you for 120 grand. And if you go on claim, you'll get 120 grand. So in the early years, you're going to be well and truly covered. But yeah, as time passes, your earnings are probably going to outgrow the policies, and that's where the level of cover under the policy, and that's where you have to keep reviewing it. Unfortunately, these policies aren't set and forget. You can't just put it in place and then leave it alone. As your income goes up and keeps changing, we probably need to review the policy and make sure that it's at that 84% level when you're getting past 160 grand income. Does that make sense? So yeah, it'll unfortunately only keep pace with inflation after that point though. So. What does it cost? Continuing on there. Not sure whether Brian or Jess would have mentioned it last week, but one of the great things about income protection insurance is that it is 100% tax deductible. So when I was using those examples of $1,500 a year cost, that was before the tax deduction. So the real out-of-pocket cost to you is going to be closer to $900 or something like that, depending on what you've earned during that particular year and what your marginal tax rate is. So that's a great benefit of it. The unfortunate thing on the other side of it, if you actually do receive a benefit from the policy, you have to pay tax on that benefit. The tax office just goes, all right, you're getting income from the insurance company, not from the hospital anymore. They don't care where it comes from. They just treat it all the same. You are best off putting the policies in place as soon as you possibly can. There's one of the other options, along with the waiting period which we spoke about and the benefit period that we spoke about. Another option is how you want the premiums to behave from year to year. So you can choose, there's two options, one's called stepped and one's called level. Stepped premiums will basically increase every year that you get older. So as the insurer considers the risk of you claiming increasing, those premiums will keep jumping up. The level premium is the other option, and that's where you can actually lock it in. You'll pay a little bit more now based on your current age, but you'll be able to lock that in, and it'll essentially, other than inflationary increases, stay the same all the way through. And so that's based on age. So the younger you are, the earlier you can lock in that level premium, the cheaper the premiums are going to be in the long run. Does that make sense? So what do you need to do? Basically, we're able to start looking at, I'm assuming that all you guys are starting January, is that right? You've all got your placements, you all know exactly where you're going and what days you're starting. I would suggest that if you want to take a look at this stuff, that you take a look at it between now and Christmas. From previous experience as well, once you guys start, you won't know what's hit you, and you'd go into hibernation for a while. I think they stick you with the night shifts and things like that. It's unideal. So I would say come and see us, or give me a call, or whatever the case may be, however you want to go about it. Have a chat to us. There's no obligation or cost just to have a chat and have a look at it. We can give you a better idea on exactly what it's going to cost you and how it all works and what the parameters are. And yeah, as I said, take a look at that stuff before you start working. We can set the policy up so that it will actually start on your first day of employment if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, you know, if it's all a bit too much for you at the moment, then if you are looking at doing tax returns with perks and you come in and see Jess or one of the other guys, mention it to them, or they may mention it to you, and we can certainly take a look at it there and go through that. Doesn't matter whether you're going interstate. If any of you guys are heading interstate and not going to be locally based, it's very easy, email, phone, we can get it all done the same way as you would if you were just here. But we also prefer face-to-face meetings if we can. What else is there? Anything else? That's about it. Yeah. So that's all, guys. Was there any other questions before I pass on? Yes.
Just quickly, does the policy cover, I suppose, death in that case, or does that cover the
No.
life insurance?
So that's a different, yep, that's life insurance, exactly. So the income protection policies are purely if you are alive and unable to work due to sickness or injury. Death cover is another type of cover that most of you guys probably don't need at this point in time unless you've got large debts and things like that. And people to look after, financial dependence, that's when that sort of stuff becomes more important. So it's normally, you know, income protection is the most important to start off with. And then, you know, if you start getting married and have kids and people are reliant on you, and it's not just you looking after yourself, then those things come along down the track.
And on that point, obviously on that point, you actually will, in your superannuation, which I believe is all through Super Estate, you guys, you will actually get some standard sort of cover, death and total and permanent disablement cover in your superannuation fund. So, which is a pretty basic sort of cover, but it's there. But like Mark said, it's definitely, you know, the time to review it is once your commitments become more in terms of families and mortgages and different things like that. That's when you're trying to.
You actually have a mandatory level of death and total and permanent disability cover through Super SA, which they automatically put in place for you. Doesn't matter whether you want it or not, you'll be paying for it and they'll be taking the premiums for it. And there's actually automatic income protection cover that they put in place for you as well. If you're interested in looking at it, so look, it's not very good cover, basically, to sum it up quickly. The definitions and benefits and the way the policies have to be structured through super are quite restrictive. So we don't usually recommend that type of cover, but if you want more detail on that, we can certainly go through it. But you will have some automatic level of cover. I know I personally wouldn't want to be relying on that if it was me though. The other point I needed to make quickly as well, before I think there was another question, was that I act as a broker as far as the companies go as well. So we're not affiliated with any particular insurer. There's 16 major retail insurers in Australia. We can use any of those, whichever ones we decide best fit your circumstances. So we're not tied or linked to any particular company.
Just wondering, do pre-existing medical conditions affect the payments?
Potentially, very good question. With this type of cover, you generally have to go through a health check to try and put the policy in place. And if you've got certain health conditions already there, there's three possible outcomes basically. You could incur a premium loading, which is where the insurer asks you to pay an additional premium because they consider you to be at an additional risk of claiming. So basically the insurers set their premiums on what they consider to be a standard person's health. And obviously, you know, they've got to make that assumption on something, and a lot of people don't fit within that assumption. So the way they can do that is offer a premium loading, so you pay a higher premium. There's no change to the contract in any other way though. Probably the more commonly used method is exclusions though, and so they may exclude, so mental health and back exclusions are the two most common. You take mental health, so if you're on any sort of anxiety or depression medication or anything like that, the insurers probably aren't going to cover that. They're going to exclude mental health, and so you'll be covered for everything else. The premium will stay the same, but they'll exclude those things. But if any of those things come up, that's I guess part of my job is that we go through those, and I let you know whether I think it's reasonable. I don't have any medical qualifications or anything like that, or what I'll be able to work out, or what I'll know is what would all the 16 insurers that we've got at our hands, how are they going to treat it? Are they all going to treat it exactly the same, or can we potentially get a better deal somewhere else that aren't going to treat it the same way? And then worst case scenario, and it does happen, is that people get declined. So you provide your information and the insurer decides that they're not willing to they consider you too high a risk and they're not willing to offer cover. And that may be a flat decline forever, or it might be a postponement and they want you to wait 12 months or something like that. Any other questions before I pass on to Pete? Oh, I'll pass you over.
I was just going to ask you about
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Yep.
The other point is that we manage all the claims at Perks, so you will find that some advisors, I guess, in our position will palm that sort of responsibility off to the insurer. We see that as a really critical element of the advice that we're providing, and so the policies that we recommend will be at the coalface if you need to claim on those, and we'll be trying to make that process as easy as possible. It's a difficult process, whether you like it or not, and it's not the insurers trying to make it difficult, we're not trying to make it difficult. It's just that they obviously need the evidence that they need to be able to justify paying out the money and that type of thing. And so, we're very hands-on and take a lot of pride in trying to make sure that that goes as smoothly as possible, so that you guys can, or whoever the client is, can just focus on trying to get better and not have to worry about this sort of stuff on the side. Good one.
Excellent. So I'm now going to talk to you about growing your wealth. So my role as a financial planner at Perks is basically to advise people on all elements of investing, meeting financial goals and objectives, all of that type of thing. So obviously, for you, you've spent lots of time in uni and maybe haven't had as much sort of work experience to date where you've had the ability to grow much wealth. I know you've probably all been really busy with university studies to date, but going forward, it's really critical to start getting some of the fundamentals of growing your wealth in place early, and that's why I just thought some of these few sort of strategies would be worthwhile running through with you. Some of you might already have them in place, but it's really just to get sort of some of the thoughts churning so that you start putting in place, because like Mark said, once you do start working, I imagine you're all going to get quite busy, so the earlier that you put these in place, the better really. And I guess to start off with budgeting, just wondering if anyone has a budget. Does anyone run to a budget at the moment, or is it pretty much what you earn is what you spend, or what your parents give you is what you spend, pretty much? Yeah. That seems to be, I've spent quite a bit of time talking to Meg, talking to the interns and that in the past, and I find that that's a common theme, that really if you hit sort of work in the hospital, suddenly you've got really big good income but not really sure how to deal with it. So in terms of budgeting, one of the best things is actually, the first thing to start is actually to track your spending. So once you, in your first year of starting to have to, and look, I know everybody's situation is obviously very unique, so some people will be living on independently, some people still living at home, but really, regardless of that, it's about tracking your spending and then working out a budget to be able to stick to it, because obviously if you don't have that, you're never really going to be able to know if you're on track or not. So they're the first two critical points to a budget. It's important to find, there's lots of different ways to budget, and I think it's really important to find the method that suits you best. And there are actually lots of different apps and websites and different things, and it's probably a good idea to find a system that works for you, and everybody's situation is, like I said, going to be very unique. So just because your friend does it one way doesn't mean that's going to work for you. And I think it's trial and error trying to find out the best way of doing it. It's definitely something I've spoken to quite a few of the sort of doctors and that about, of how, so trying to just ask questions, how do you do it? What do you use credit cards? Do you use a savings account? How did your pay come in? All those types of things. Once you know all that information, we can start to really formulate what's the best way of actually having a budget and then managing it ongoing. The other thing is to be realistic, because I think a lot of people who I speak to set a budget, but they try to be really tight with it. And I think in reality, we all need to have, you're working hard, we need to have the ability to be able to spend on things that make us feel like it's been worth it. So be really realistic with the budget, and know that it does actually take some dedication and time. And I think, but what you put into it is what you'll get out of it. And like I say, the earlier that you can start these habits, the better